Hey guys, welcome back to Let's Unpack That. It's a new year, a new administration, a new episode of the pod. So excited to be back here. A lot has happened since that Wicked review back in December. A few weeks ago, we got a new president. And you may ask, Mitchell, what did you do that day? What were you doing? Well, I ran away to the woods and locked myself in a cabin and danced to like 2014 pop bangers. Just really had time of my life. And I winded down eventually and made a fire in the fire pit. And I read this book called Goodbye to Boyhood. Phone off, by the fire, reading. Absolute vibe, right? So I'm sitting there reading, and as I kept going through all these stories that are the short stories that are in this book, I was like just so moved and loved everything and felt so seen and inspired by what I was reading. And the person who wrote the book, I had said, hey, you need to come on the pod before. But when I closed this book, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to make this happen now. So I am so excited to welcome to Let's Unpack That, the author of Goodbye to Boyhood, Spencer Thomas.
Thank you for having me. First off, I'm honored that you took the time to read my book. So thank you for that. And
of course.
Running off into the woods sounds like a great place to be, considering the past few weeks.
Yeah, it was the best disconnect. And I am so glad that I read it and I was able to read it. And I cannot encourage everyone listening to this podcast enough to read it. And I hope by the end of this, they'll be on their way to Amazon.com or their local bookstore to get it themselves.
I hope so, because I'm not biased or anything, even though because I wrote it. But yeah, that would
have to spread the good
great.
word, Spencer. Slight tangent, but I'm not even a big reader. But this book is just incredible. I cannot say enough glowing things about it. And Spencer, I apologize for the amount of times I hype you up throughout this episode. Everyone listening, do a drinking game or something, or like a shot of espresso or something. Like, I don't if you're doing like dry Q1 or something, like just
a shot
just
of espresso because Sabrina Carpenter won
Yes.
Best Pop Vocal. Okay, I see.
Yes, we're celebrating Sabrina. We're celebrating the girls. Exactly. Well, Spencer, before we jump into your story, I wanna set the tone. Okay, as you kind of alluded to, as I kind of was saying, it's been a heavy few weeks. A lot's going on. So I want to start on a light note, on a fun note. So I don't know about you, Spencer, but every other day I have a new hyperfixation, something new that I'm obsessed with, that I like can't stop thinking about, but I'm like really the only one who cares about it. I feel like we all have something, right? And so I feel like sharing our hyperfixations here is like a safe space to just, let it out. And who knows, maybe we'll have something in common. You never know. It's like the perfect icebreaker. My hyperfixations right now, I have two. One is a follow-up to what I said last time. Last time I spoke a little bit about media literacy and how people just fall for anything they see on TikTok, like i.e. thinking that Beyonce is like a war criminal or something because people think her at award shows, okay? Like what? And people believe it with their whole soul and being. And yesterday, when we're recording this on February 3rd, so yesterday was the Grammys, and I'm sure anyone who has any sort of social media has likely seen the fury surrounding this. I just feel like there has been so many album of the years that did not go my way. I mean, I wasn't thrilled when Harry Styles went over Renaissance or when Lemonade didn't win, or so many icons have not gotten Grammys, okay? And I urge you, if you're out here just dying on the hill, but you've never even listened to the album, listen to it, please. It's actually a beautiful body of art and is so rich in American history and the history of the Black community. It is incredible, worth a listen. Second, okay, and I need to address this because it really just grinds my gears. Is we all know that there was an election a few months back, and we are currently seeing the consequences of that. It is wild to me that a billionaire can just decide if a government agency can just no longer exist, or a department could just no longer exist, and no one will say anything about it. So I encourage all of you listening to look past the noise when you see like, oh, tariffs, blah blah blah. What is actually what are they trying to hide from you? It sounds like I'm being a conspiracy theorist, but just I know it's exhausting to look at and to try to keep up with everything, but we all know, I think everyone is aware that our community is, and those who are part of the LGBTQIA plus community, some of those people are being targeted by this administration. And I want those people both listening to know that you are valued and supported and loved, and we're not going down without a fight. You're not going to get people to just disappear overnight because they make you feel uncomfortable or unseen. And I really, really hope that there's some course correction in the future, but just know that you're not the only one feeling stressed and spiraling, but trying my best to stay hopeful that there's light on the other end of this tunnel. Anyways, that was kind of heavy. Spencer, do you have a hyperfixation to share?
I have a few. I want to add on to what you were saying first. I feel like when it comes to the Grammys, because I created this spreadsheet, I take this very seriously. My friends and I, every year, we invest our time into kind of figuring out who we want to win, who's going to get nominated. This is business, okay? This is my Super Bowl. I take it very seriously. And so when Beyonce won for Cowboy Carter for Album of the Year, I was elated. I mean, if Beyonce didn't win and it went to Charlie or Billy or Chapel or Taylor, I would have been happy too. Or even Sabrina, I would have been happy too, because all my girls were nominated. And so I am not a picky person. However, you know, you have a career for 25 years. You have Renaissance, Lemonade, both which were snubbed. I feel like it was long overdue for Beyonce to win Album of the Year. And to anybody online, because I'm already fighting the in the spaces talking about it, I feel like just take a breath, because first off, it's never that serious. And two, your favorite artist is going to win again. Taylor already has 4 of these. She has 4 Albums of the Year. I'm a Swiftie. Love my girl. But she'll be okay. She'll get another one. Billy will get another one in due time. Chapel will. You know, Charlie, I hope so. I hope she will. I mean, all these girls are going to keep thriving and succeeding so long as we support them and invest our time into their art. And Beyonce's moment is long overdue. And that's my stance with that. As for all the political fun stuff, because things have just been an absolute blast. It's been about 2 weeks. It's been a long 2 weeks. Feels like it's been a year. I feel like it's important to hold the community close and to look out for those that have the backs of your friends and the people that are part of your community, because that's what we really need right now. As for my hyperfixations, onto a more lighter note, my first current hyperfixation is American Dad. I've talked about this online extensively too. When I was a kid, I was really invested in like adult cartoons. I just thought they were stupid, and I liked them a lot when I was like 12. But now I'm older and I haven't seen them in a long time. But I kept getting like TikTok clips of American Dad, and I was like, this is funny as fuck. I need to invest my time into this show again. And after He Who Shall Not Be Named became president again, I might have had to go into hibernation and entered a bit of a depression. And so American Dad kind of got me through, and I had an absolute blast. And I'm pretty invested into the newer seasons, which are very well written and have grown a lot since when I watched them when I was like in middle school. My second hyperfixation, which is also kind of political, but it's really fascinating to me, is the idea of being radicalized by like a social media algorithm. So like, let's say, you know, you're a young teenager, a young guy, and you download TikTok for the first time. The algorithm is like, it feeds back into itself. So whatever biases that you've been taught or that are kind of surrounding you will be fed back into the algorithm, into the content that you're consuming. And it creates a echo chamber. And this applies to me too, because when I was, you know, when he won, I was a little surprised because I was on Coconut's Brad's TikTok. You know, I was having a blast over here, but there's an entire other side of the app that is much larger, almost in scale, that is equally as influential. But that's the danger of social media algorithms is we don't recognize that because they don't cross each other. So I'm fascinated by that, and I did my entire senior thesis for one of my classes last semester on social media algorithms. It was titled, fittingly, Radicalization of Teenage Men Through Social Media Algorithms. So that's my other hyperfixation.
Did you do like research for that?
Yeah, it was my semester project. I did like weeks upon weeks of research on it. And then what I actually ended up doing for the presentation was I created a fake TikTok account on my little phone right here. And I didn't like anything, but I followed like another study that did the same thing. And I kind of just like scrolled through videos. And it took me like an hour to get onto like a very mischievous, weird, like sexist, like homophobic side of TikTok. Like it didn't take much. And that is scary. But to me, it's also equally like it's fascinating because I don't think we'd be in the situation we are in right now if it wasn't for that FYP style algorithm. Mm-hmm. Anyways, I digress.
No, it's a very unique tool, hence why people want control of it so badly. That's really fascinating, though, that you can get on that side of TikTok so quickly. Even when...
You have no idea.
Yeah. I mean, there's like an alternate version of Spencer out there who is on... who's on that For You page that you created. Even when TikTok came back, when they turned the servers back on, like the For You page was a little funky for a second. I was like, are we resetting? Like, am I finding my interests again? I thought it was interesting. Well, Spencer, let's get into your story. This is the question I like to ask all of our new guests because I could sit here and describe what people view from you on the outside, but I'd much rather have you say it in your own words. So, who is Spencer Thomas?
Well, I can give you the elevator pitch, but who I am is my name is Spencer. I am an author, and I wrote this book. It's called Goodbye to Boyhood. It's a collection of 10 short stories about growing up. But on a deeper level, who I really am is a person who really cares a lot about relating to other people and finding shared community within isolation. I am really inspired by the idea that, like, through whatever challenges a person kind of faced on their own, they are able to connect with other people through those and kind of make fun of it or like find humor in it, but overall relating on a deeper level and kind of growing through the things you go through. So cliche, I know. And so I'm a writer. That's my trade. I also make TikToks, which is why you might have seen my face in the past. I do all of it. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I do it for the gays and the girls. So that's why I'm here. And Goodbye to Boyhood, my first of many books, is about growing up and what it means to say goodbye to something that was never truly yours to begin with, which is the concept of boyhood. Because I think that when you grow up in kind of like a queer space or you know that you're not like straight, it kind of puts you in no man's land where you're too much of a kind of a girl to be with the boys, but too much of a boy to be with the girls. And that is kind of what Goodbye to Boyhood explores. So how'd I do, Mitchell?
No,
yeah?
That was amazing. I love that. I love your like purpose and mission and what you're trying to do. Speaking of Boyhood, I'd love to start at the beginning. So you grew up in Redding, Connecticut. What was life like there for you?
Yeah, so I live in New York City now, and I grew up about an hour and a half from the city in like a small town, very farmy, very New England colonial. In a lot of ways, it has kind of the charm of Gilmore Girls, but the solitude of like being in the deep woods. And I lived on a nature preserve, so I grew up around a lot of bears and foxes, and it was pretty quiet. And so my life started there. I have a twin sister, and I always felt a little, what's the word? I felt a little trapped because I didn't really feel like I had found any sense of footing in my childhood home or in my childhood town or in my school. And so for a long time, it was the feeling that kind of comes to mind is awkward. Like, growing up was an awkward experience, but most of it is just awkward and uncomfortable. Until you feel comfortable in your skin, it's kind of just like you're a shell of yourself trying to be everything that you're not. And so that's kind of how I felt growing up in a lot of ways. And I don't feel that way anymore, thank God, but I did then. And that's kind of a lot of the inspiration behind Goodbye to Boyhood is just like this awkwardness and trying to like fit into different puzzle pieces, and it just is not clicking.
Yeah, and to the point of Goodbye to Boyhood, like reading some of these stories in the book, especially that kind of speak to that experience when you're younger and trying to figure it all out in a small community. I grew up in a small town in southeastern Wisconsin in a very conservative area, and so I could relate to what you were saying in these stories. You mentioned feeling kind of trapped and isolated in that experience. Can you set the stage a little bit? Like, what was your life like in elementary school? How many people were in your classes? How big of a community were you in?
Yeah, so I grew up with about like the same 100 kids my entire life. There was like maybe like a little less than 400 kids in my school system, but we were too small of a town to be a high school, so we did have to combine with the town over for high school. We'll get into that later. But when I was a kid, I very much felt like this need to explore and be creative. And a lot of that was hindered because of the fact that the gender norms for young boys are set from the jump. And so you can't go dance and do theater and sing, and this is what I was told, but instead you're going to go get your ass on the soccer field and you're going to go play soccer, which is in the book, or you're going to go do all these manly things and you're going to hunker down and be a bro, which I never fit that norm, and nor is my story relating to sexuality, special, because this is not, a unique thing. A lot of us have experienced these exact feelings. So it's a very universal reality that when you grow up as a young boy, you're taught to fall in line, essentially, right? And so I struggle a lot with that feeling. And when I was younger, I would read a lot and I would write a lot before I understood what that would ever turn into. But I always found that to be a very creative outlet, especially books. I was really obsessed with the Grimm brothers. I loved fairy tales and fantasy and even coming of age stories back then, before I knew they were coming of age stories. I just found myself invested in going into other places than being where I was.
Was there a moment when you first felt like you found that escape? Like, is there a book or a specific moment that comes to mind?
Before I became a writer, I was really big on like dancing and singing. It's so cliche, but I loved to dance and sing, and I would, do it all the time in my free time when I was at home. I don't have the pipes that I did then when I was 10 or 9, but
so you were like a prodigy. You were singing, dancing, writing. You could like write your own musical practically.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I don't know if doing breakdancing classes at the age of 8 counts as being a prodigy for anything, but I loved my breakdancing classes and I kicked ass at that recital. And mind you, in the 4th grade talent show, I kicked ass singing the Rainbow Connection. So
wow.
I dabbled in all the arts, right? Before writing kind of was the one that I chose to go down. Although, do all of them if you can. I just kind of ended up
you have to try it all, right? You were athletic, you sang, you danced.
I was not athletic. No. I did sports because I was told to. I was like, you got to go do the soccer, do the basketball.
You tried it, yeah.
I was a bench warmer, babe. I was on the sidelines and I was the bench warmer. They used to do this thing because every Saturday I'd go play rec basketball. I was on the team. It was sponsored by like some local business, and everyone had like the little colorful t-shirts on, and you go to the gym in the rec center and you play basketball with all the kids you go to school with. And what they did, what I would do is they would say, Spencer, you're going to go run to the opposite side of the court while we play basketball over here, and you're going to wait. And if if the team gets the ball, they're going to toss it to you, and you're going to do a little layup. But no one ever tossed it to me. So I would just sit there and wait. And sometimes I got it. I got 3 total baskets in the entirety of that season. So, out of like 16 games, 3. So not athletic, but I did write and I did read. So it all worked itself out.
It feels like you were almost like the hidden weapon, like you were like the closer for this team. And when they needed you, they tapped on you and you got those baskets.
We didn't. It's okay. It's fine. I didn't get the baskets. I really didn't. The one time I did, my family freaked out. They were like, "Holy shit, finally!" But for the most part, no, it was a flop.
Well, you were trying, as I think so many do, to fit into the boxes that like society and like small town living kind of tries to like force you into. Like, oh, you are a boy, you need to go play sports, or oh, you are a girl, you need to go be on the cheer team. Like, there's 2 buckets, and it feels impossible sometimes to be anywhere in the middle without feeling like completely ostracized from everyone else. When you were growing up and going through that, like who was there for you? Like, who did you lean on? Was there anyone in your family or in your friend circle who was particularly impactful on you?
Yeah, so I have a very tight-knit family. Like I was mentioning earlier, I have a twin sister, and so my twin sister and I went through every single thing we had in our childhood together, just down different paths that were parallel to each other. And so while I was bad at basketball and sports and just couldn't, for the life of me, fit the traditional stereotype of being a boy, it just was never in the cards for me. She was quintessential, like, popular girl, like, athletic, smart. Like, she kind of had the chance to have a more, I would say, I don't want to use the word easier, but understanding childhood, like, because she, was able to kind of excel as a kid. And so I always had her kind of rely on, but we were in very different places growing up. And so that was always interesting to talk about with her, especially now that we're older. But besides that, I had my grandmother in my life who was like the tether to a lot of everything that I am, now is a product of her in some way, shape, or form. And so she was the one who would give me books and who would read with me. And we read all the classics together because, fun fact, Mark Twain had a house in my town in like the woods. And so we used to read a lot of Mark Twain together, and we would just read. And she was big on history and science and math and just classic literature. And so I spent a lot of time with her just reading and chatting about anything, really. So she was my comfort person.
That's awesome. Honestly, those moments with like a grandparent or like someone who, whether it's a mom or a dad or a grandma or a grandpa or an aunt, like those safe, comforting people are like just the best thing to have growing up. I love that you had your Mark Twain moment. You said, I don't need to go to Tom Sawyer Island at Disney World. Like we have that at home. Like we have it right here. When you were spending that time with your grandma and you were reading and getting into literature, do you feel like that is what helped you kind of want to start tapping into your writing side?
What my grandmother really taught me was greater than my relationship to writing and reading, but it was the art of a good story, right? I would watch her recount stories of her life being a teacher back in Flint, Michigan, where she grew up. And I was so amazed by how invested people would be in her stories. And I realized pretty quickly at a young age that stories are a bid for connection. And as I've gotten older, a lot of the ways that I interact in my everyday life with my friends or family or people that I'm meeting for the first time is through the act of a funny story or an experience, because that is what tethers us together, right? Is the act of shared story. And so that's what she taught me. And that is how I translate everything into my book or my Substack or my TikToks even. It's the act of story as a bid for connection. Mm-hmm. And that is what she taught me.
Do you recall what the first thing you wrote was, or what type of writing you started with?
Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of my writing as a kid was so morbid. It was so fucked up. It was horrible. I remember I wrote a story in the 3rd grade about being kidnapped on vacation. That was fun. Read it to the entire class. Chewed. I ate. Everyone clapped. When I was in 4th grade, I wrote a story again about like divorce and kidnap and chaos and running away from the evil that is like people. And it was pretty dark shit. I don't know what was going on with me, but I was not happy. And so the stories were not happy either.
Do you feel like those topics like reflected like what you were going through personally at the time? Like, were you putting yourself in those situations as a way of kind of processing what was going on in your life and or feeling different and alone?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that I was definitely very isolated and lonely growing up, but no in the sense that I just loved drama. I loved melodramatic drama, things that would provoke a reaction. And so a lot of the stories I wrote at a very young age were meant to kind of be a little ridiculous. And even in my book, even in a lot of the writing I have now, like sometimes things are ridiculous. But that's the point, is because where's the fun? Where's the fun in anything if it's not a little dramatic, you know? And so that is what I gravitated towards when I was a young kid. And then as I got older, my writing kind of shifted a little away from the morbid, the death, the destruction, the divorce, the chaos, more into stream of consciousness, growing up and kind of verbalizing for the first time how I felt with myself. And then it became a lot more personal.
As you kept writing and your writing got more personal and more focused and you continued to build upon those skills, did you start to think about pursuing that as a career?
I always wanted to be a writer. It was never a doubt in my mind that I would want to be in a public field. I mean, like I said, when I was a kid, I loved dancing and singing. And so when I was 10, I wrote in the yearbook that I wanted to be a dancer and a singer and an actor, but I can't act. So acting did not work out for me. I didn't have the chops for it. But I did have the chops for writing. What I loved about writing then and what I love about it now is its permanence, because Goodbye to Boyhood, this is a book. Like I can give you this book, and we may never talk ever again, but there is a physical copy of writing out there that technically I wrote it, but it doesn't matter who wrote it. It doesn't matter that I wrote the book. It's just a collection of stories, and people can take that and interpret it how they can or how they want to, and then they can build new stories from there. And what I've always loved about writing is how it can kind of translate into other avenues or greater projects, or be an idea or a launching pad for somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you did in that middle school, early high school phase that helped you realize that this really could be something that you could make a career?
None of that came until high school for me.
Okay.
And so middle school was all trial and error, and it was conformity and trying to figure out my role as like a young teenage boy. And so it was a very confusing time because I didn't understand that I was gay yet. Like, being gay was always subconsciously a thing that I understood that I was, but I wasn't anywhere close to making terms with that. And so it didn't matter as much about like my career in business or whatever. All I cared about was just trying to, I would say, make something of myself. Like it wasn't about the label of business or work. It was just about, I would like to be something great because I felt so grossly small. And a lot of it was just a rejection of self. Hence, I was so invested in like cartoons or reading or writing or business, because it was just a rejection of my own personal baggage.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, you couldn't fully embrace yourself for who you are. And I think that's something that a lot of gay people and people in general almost think go through in that middle school, high school period. It's like that bumpy transition that everyone's like forced to endure. It's like being shaken in like a laundry machine almost. It feels like just a bumpy ride for everyone. When you got through that and you got to high school, do you feel like you were able to express yourself a little bit more? Was there any like starting to explore your identity, or what was Spencer like when he got into high school?
So
The sigh.
I was bullied a lot as a kid, right, for being gay before I realized I was gay. And I was bullied a lot for having a speech impediment because I grew up with a speech impediment. And that took me a long time to overcome. But, that's besides the point. What I was also was incredibly annoying because I was miserable with myself. And so high school me and middle school me are not the person I am now, but I think that every person in middle school is a little bit insufferable, along with the early version of who we are as teenagers is not that enjoyable. And so I did not necessarily like myself then, not only from looking back as who I am now, but also because I was just playing a character of a person that I am not. I was just desperate to create walls for myself and to lash out at anybody remotely who kind of came too close to getting through the walls. Like, I was very scared of letting people in my life. And so I didn't really explore my identity and my self-exploration until I was a junior in high school. It took 2 more years. But what I also had to do in order to get to that point was leave my first school. And I embarked down a kind of ridiculously weird high school journey. But if it wasn't for that, I don't know what the timeline would have looked like.
Well, let's get into that timeline, because your sophomore year, you did online school. What led you to making that decision? Like, how did you decide I want to try out this virtual learning thing?
Yeah, so as I was finishing up my freshman year of high school, this was at the high school where our towns were so small they combined to the one town with the other town. And so I was so hyped. I was like, oh my God, I can finally have new friends. I can, branch out. Like, things are going to change for the better. And they didn't really change at all. And instead I found them kind of get worse. And so what ended up happening after my freshman year, I keep having a voice cracks. Sorry. After my freshman year, I did one of those like pre-college programs where they make you feel like you're an adult when you're 15, and you go for a few weeks and you take classes and you just feel like you're on top of the world. I did one of those in New York City, which is where my grandma lived, which is also why I fell in love with New York, was because I would fall in love with it through her eyes, and I would stay with her at her apartment because she moved here when I was about like 8, 9 years old. And so I came to New York for a few weeks after my freshman year of high school, did a pre-college program, and it was my first time kind of just letting myself meet people and being more open with myself. Like, I wasn't expressing my identity, like that happened later, but I was trying to let myself break down the walls a little bit, and I had made friends for the first time, and I felt so free. And then I had to go from New York back to my small town to deal with the same kids that I've known since I was 4 years old. I lost it, and I needed to have a fresh start. And so I ended up going into online school, which was pre-COVID, a little unconventional, and it's also something that I never talk about because I have a bit of an embarrassment around it. But what I ended up doing...
Why do you feel embarrassed?
There is a real stigma around homeschool, online school, and people love to assume something is deeply wrong with you for doing it, even though there's not. But I remember when I was doing online school, I got a lot of like people to kind of like judging it or making fun of it, like, oh, that's not real school. That's not, like, you're not, like, something's wrong with you. Like, that's not real school. Like, one of those things. Like, people invalidate the experience. But the truth is, my 1 year, my sophomore year of high school, doing online school was the hardest thing I've done in my entire life. It was harder than public school. It was harder than Catholic school. Not emotionally, but academically. It was harder than my own college. I'm at NYU. I'm a senior at NYU, double majored in English and journalism. Online school, my sophomore year of high school, is harder than all 4 years of this shit. And so it was a really weird time in my life because I was 15 going on 16, quintessential teenage years. My mom, she works in nonprofit, like healthcare. And so my mom works in nonprofit care. And what I ended up doing for an entire year is I would go with her to work. And I had my cubicle, and I would sit in a cubicle at a hospice center, a facility where people go to die, mind you. And I would volunteer there, but I would also like work from like 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. doing the assignments that I was given. And so whether it was an essay, I'd write it, send it in, and then my professor abroad or somewhere else in the world would grade it and review it, and we'd have Zoom calls. But all of it was graded, all of it was accredited, and I took a lot of really challenging classes, and it was absolutely suffocating. It was a really hard experience.
Not to bring levity in this moment, but I feel like you almost had this journey of like growing up quickly. Like you went to this like college program when you were early in high school. You left your small town, similar to so many people do when they go to college. And then you came back, realized you despised your small town even more than you thought you did, as so many do when they go back to their town after like being in college. And then you ended up working a kind of a 9 to 5 in a cubicle, but you were doing online school. Like you entered the professional world grinding like the hardest you've ever done. Like pretty much, Spencer, you're that bitch. Clearly, like you were on that grind.
Well, yeah, it was. That's kind of what it was. I go to a pre-college program, come back, I'm like, holy shit, I never want to be here ever again. Ended up doing my schoolwork in a cubicle, volunteering for dying people, right?
Yeah.
Which was super. I'll talk about it another time, but I mean, it's interesting to be around so much death at such a young age because.
How old were you at that time?
I was 16.
Yeah.
I was 16, and so my being 16 years old wasn't. I didn't go to high school parties or have fun and have friends and go kiki it up. I was working in a cubicle, doing all my school online, taking my AP classes before I was allowed to previously, and I was writing my first book, which will never see the light of day. But it was a really intense jump, and no one was there to push me at the other end of it. Like, it was just me teaching myself, and then my grades reflected what I taught myself and how hard I was willing to work. And so it was really challenging. And then after that year of being miserable and completely alone, I ended up going back to another college program. This one wasn't a pre-college one. This one was actual like college, and I did like a 9-week intensive, like 9 weeks at Harvard and Cambridge. Yeah. And so then I did a couple of college classes there, which actually I did after. It's been 5 years. No, I was 16. I spent 6 years. Those college credits from when I was 16, I just applied them, and now I don't have any other classes to take for college. So,
oh my gosh.
16-year-old me, he kind of came through because I forgot about that.
Congratulations.
So
Period.
I'm only in one class right now until I graduate, and that is Spanish 4. Thank you, NYU. So, anyways, so right after I finished up with my high school sophomore year of isolation in the cubicle at the hospital center, I jumped right into Harvard for classes, and then that was when it hit me that I can't keep doing this I'm not gay thing anymore. And when I started going on dates with girls, and I was like, oh shit, I'm gay because I'm not enjoying this and I'm very scared. And so that is when the can of worms kind of exploded. I talked about this in my Substack the other day, but kind of what I did was I had this little theory. My theory was, you ready for this, Mitchell?
I'm ready.
My theory was pretty simple. My theory was, let me kiss a girl, and then when she kisses me, it'll be like the magic slipper fitting Cinderella's foot, and I'll not be gay. I'll be straight. It'll be magical. And every time I have this vision of me kissing a girl at summer camp, it was accompanied by the sounds of Lana Del Rey music, right? Because straight men just love Lust for Life by Lana Del Rey. But I was imagining me kissing a girl to Lust for Life, and I was like, yes, like that is what's going to fix this situation. And so I ended up kissing my friend for the first time. Had my first kiss when I was 16 in a dorm room with my friend who knew I was having trouble finding someone to kiss, kissed me, and then she tried to full on hook up with me, and I panicked, and I was like, no! I like ran out the room. And then I went on a date with someone else at that summer camp, and I kissed them too, and they were beautiful, and they were great, and we had a really nice date. And I just knew that it wasn't going to work because all the pieces were in place for it to be a successful kiss, a successful date, something great, and I just knew that it wasn't for me. And so after I left that program, I was gearing up to get ready for my transfer into a new school because I got into a Catholic school because I wasn't going to go back to my old school. I had no other schools that were gonna take me in time, and they gave me a scholarship. And so I was kind of like, all right, I'm gonna go here. My sister ended up transferring with me to this Catholic school. As I was exiting this actual college program at 16, entering a new high school as a junior, I was like, shit, I'm a flaming homosexual. It's not going to work, and I don't know what I'm going to do. And I was panicking. I go into this new school. I'm wrapping my head around it. At first, I was wrapping my head around the idea of being bisexual, but I'm not bisexual, but I was then. And so my coming out post was literally, well, by the way, I'm thriving with a BI.
Oh my God.
I buried it, but that was that. And Catholic school in its entirety, while all the religion was rough, and it was a really weird time to discover you're gay for the first time in a place where you're actively told that you don't belong or you should not exist. I had the best friends. It was the first time I made really great friends in high school, and I had these quintessential high school experiences that I would have never gotten otherwise. And I found the girls that were also, queer, and I didn't really have any guy friends, but I found the girls that were also queer, and I had great girlfriends in school, and I'm very grateful for that time because they really helped me kind of on my journey of self-discovery.
Before being in Catholic school, you were like, okay, I need to get a girl to kiss me. Was there any, like, guys your junior year or senior year where you were like, maybe I can try something with this person? Or was that pretty off limits until college?
Oh, no. I mean, what happened is I got outed by this guy who I was into. He was into me, but then shit hit the fan, and he was like, oh, my God, I'm not actually gay. Like, what? Bro, no. And then he told everybody that I was this, like, raging gay person who is just sexual and horrible and this deviant, promiscuous gay guy. Like, ugh, like, disgusting.
So unfortunate.
But his story didn't make sense. And he was gay, too, but not out. Still not out after all these years.
He was projecting.
Poor guy, but
yeah, poor him.
it was like, what the fuck, bro? I was like, I thought we were cool, but we were not cool, as it turns out. And I've talked about that story so many times.
Yeah,
like,
we don't need to give him more hype. No,
he's good.
No.
After I came out officially in October of my junior year of high school in 2019, you can do the math on how old I am. I'm 22 now. I tried on a lot of personalities and a lot of different styles of gay, a lot of which were modeled off of the television that I watched or the videos on my phone from TikTok. And so I didn't have a concrete idea of who I was, but I had a concrete vision of the person that I was going to quote unquote be. And so a lot of skinny jeans, a lot of cuffed pants, a lot of flannels, a lot of blonde hair dye. It was a lot of really bad TikToks. It took me a long time to figure out what I was comfortable with because I was just trying on these ideas of what I thought it meant to be a gay person, and I was trying on these different versions of myself to see which one I liked the best. And that was my first time I really explored with myself and my identity. And I actually let myself try to figure it out for the first time. And all the while, I wrote extensively about being gay. It was obsessive to me to write about gayness. And I was also obsessed with making TikToks for the first time because it was new and fresh. And I saw that there were these other gay TikTokers that were kind of like famous. And I thought, oh my God, can you imagine if people can follow you and you can get to know them and you guys can bond over your sexuality and like these like gay things that only gay guys have with each other? I was sold, and I had a lot of moments of experimentation online and in my personal life to get where I am today. But that was, a lot of it is really embarrassing, so it's best that it's kind of left buried.
Yeah, we can keep that in the vault. You feel like when you were making that content, like, and you were kind of still trying to figure out who exactly like Spencer was, like you were kind of putting on this costume of what you felt like a gay person looks like, how a gay person acts. Do you feel that the community that you were building online and the response you were getting from the videos you were creating kind of helped you? Do you feel like supported and seen and valued in a way that those in your immediate, in real life like maybe couldn't support you or couldn't validate you because they don't understand necessarily what you were going through?
Of course. TikTok, social media, these try-on periods of being the person I wanted to become, all of this was in an effort to find community and people that I could relate with. People that understood how I had felt my entire life, being isolated, feeling on the outside of everything. And I guess just looking for someone to kind of look me in the eyes and say, like, I see you, I get you, like, we're in this together, like, we're on the same wavelength right here, you know? And I didn't have that with other gay people in my high school. I had great friends, but they weren't gay. I had a great family, but they didn't get it. I lived in a small town in the middle of nowhere in Connecticut. It was completely me, myself, and I trying to find other people who were also in that same position in their town. And so TikTok gave me that chance for the first time to actually have that connection with other people across the country and the world that were experiencing the same thing that I had been feeling. And in a lot of ways, that's what Goodbye to Boyhood is, right? Is my book is the accumulation of stories that are relatively universal, because I don't think these stories are inherently unique or special, because that's not the point of them. The point of them is that they're relatable because we both exist, me and you, and we both come from small towns, and we have common ground with each other because we know what it's like to be gay in a small town, what it's like to kind of feel the intensity of those emotions, right? And the same thing applies to other people that we may know or may not know, that we might have a lot of differences, but the common ground we do have is this shared experience. And that is what bridges us together, even through our own loneliness.
Mm-hmm. There's really nothing more powerful than finding that shared connection, especially when it's in those surprising moments of people that you feel like, oh, I would never, connect with them. But then you see that you have this commonality, and that's so powerful to have. When you were making that content initially and finding that connection, how did it feel to begin not feeling as alone?
That actually that's a really beautiful question. It felt awesome. I love that word. It's so colloquial. I feel like no one says awesome anymore. But it was awesome. It was so special to have met people for the first time who understood how I felt, who were inspired with the stories we told each other, and we were able to kind of grow stronger together as a unit. Back then, we're talking 2019, 2020, my social media was not Spencer Thomas, but it was a alternate universe where I called myself gay. It was so cringy and so weird, but what I am so grateful for then, and what's really special to me, is how tight-knit I was with the people that had followed me in the beginning, and how we had each other's backs, and we had this amazing community that really supported each other. And I will never not be thankful for it, because even now, a lot of those people are people I care deeply about, and they mean a lot to me. So yeah, it was a great feeling.
Mm-hmm. The people that are there for you in those initial moments, no matter if, you like go separate ways or you don't see each other all the time and they don't maintain maybe the same presence in your life that they did at one point, like, I feel like those connections, they can never really fade because you bonded at such a level that is so unique and personal where like you know you can always count on each other no matter what.
Yeah, and I think that's the beautiful thing about gayness is that I think with any community really, like, no matter where we are at in our lives or how different we may be, we have common ground with each other, and we have to have each other's backs. I think to be part of the LGBTQ plus community is such a privilege in a lot of ways because it's not about us being different or we're part of this one community and no one else is part of it, but we all have a shared experience in some way. And it's important we look out for one another because this community is formed up of a coalition of people from all over the world that have all struggled with their gender and their sex, with their sexuality and their gender. And it's not about like being separate or being this one thing, but felt some sense of turbulence because of this one thing.
Yeah.
And that's really important to me in my writing. Goodbye to Boyhood is like truly it's a trick. The way I wrote the book, the way it's structured, the way it's designed is meant to kind of be a little misleading. Because I didn't create the book with the intention of having it just be like a gay book or a book just for my LGBTQ plus my girls. Like, it's not just for the people that are part of this community, but it's for anybody who has felt some sense of struggle with their gender or their sexuality, and they're maybe they're like me when I was 16 and they're not ready to accept that yet, or maybe they are aware of it and they don't know how to tap into those feelings and where to go from there.
To your point of the LGBTQI plus community needing to be together, I think in the current world that we're in, and when there's been so many movements of trying to just have it be like LGB community, it's so important that we all stand together, because like that's been and I'm sorry to have a pivot mid Spencer's story here, but it's like it's been a movement to, in quotes, to a degree the past few years, where there's like a select portion of the, specifically I feel, gay community who like refuses to be associated with those who are TQIA plus, especially like the T. They really struggle with that, and it's just heartbreaking because I feel like, to your point, like our community is so strong and unstoppable when we stand together. Like, we all go through these different experiences to a degree. Granted, they're all different and they're all unique and they all have nuance, but there is commonality there that brings us together in a way that no other group of people can support us and each other. Like, it's heartbreaking to see, and I really hope that people continue to uplift each other rather than try to ostracize one another.
I mean, that's the thing right there, right? Is I'm really tired of gay men having issues with trans women as if they aren't the very reason why they have rights in the first place. The reason that community is so important is because without one piece of community, there is no community. Community is built upon different coalitions of people that come together for a shared cause, a shared movement. We are bigger in numbers, in strength, in being unified than dividing each other apart. And that's the problem, is if you're gay or if you're bi, if you're, whatever you identify as, don't attack other people part of the community. That's counterintuitive to our need to try to get anything done. Go after the people that are trying to strip your rights. It's a deeper conversation politically too, but basically the way I look at it is we need to have a strong front, and we need to kind of look out for each other, especially as the Trump administration will continue to roll back protections. And honestly, they're going to go for Obergefell v. Hodges in the next few years. So
yeah, let's get back to you, Spencer. So you graduate high school. You go to college. You mentioned before that you love spending time in New York. You loved getting to see it through your grandma's eyes. Is that connection to the city what largely led to you picking NYU for college?
I always was going to move to New York. It was just a matter of where. It was a matter of opportunity for my writing career. 'Cause as I got older, I realized, this is actually something that I can pursue. And so NYU was a good option because I loved the area. I loved being downtown. I toured at all these other colleges, and I just gravitated towards NYU's creative writing program. And so it was a done deal. When I got in, I was like, great, I'm out. And my grandma, she moved out of New York during the pandemic, so she wasn't here anymore. But she was the primary reason that I fell in love with New York, was because I saw it through her eyes and would go to the museums with her and spend a lot of time with her here. I mean, she was the person who took me to Stonewall for the first time, right? When I was like 17. Like, she took pictures of me outside Stonewall. We had a blast. There was never a doubt in my mind that I would end up in New York, and NYU was my vessel to being here. And it was not, and I was really excited for NYU too, but it was much more about being in New York more than anything.
How did you feel your life changing during that transition to the city? What was it like?
I was ready for it, and I was so mentally prepared to jump into an entirely new life and just become an entirely new, different person, that when I moved to New York, I just didn't look back, and I just threw myself into everything. And I really wanted the chance to experience. And so I did. I made a lot of friends. I actively put myself in uncomfortable situations that I never would have put myself in before, because I was such a goody two-shoes growing up. And I was scared of everything, and I was scared of trying new things. And spoiler alert, you drink a lot when you're a freshman in college, and you party a lot, and you have fun. And I tapped out of my comfort zones, and I let myself explore. And I had so many great memories with so many people. And it was also the first time I really tapped into my gayness, and I, kissed men, and I tried to go on dates for the first time, which was all so refreshing. It was really a honeymoon period for the first year of my time in New York. It was this period of just, you're young and nothing really matters yet, and you're with your friends, just completely unsupervised in a massive city with a form of identification which may or may not be legit, and you're just having an absolute time.
Yeah, like you're in euphoria practically. Like,
it was euphoric. It was.
Yes. Is there something that led to you kind of leaving that honeymoon period that kind of was like, whoa, like this is a ride?
I mean, there's many things that kind of break the ice on the honeymoon period, right? The challenges and friendships that you think are great that kind of through the cracks aren't so great after a while. The, dating men or trying to and realizing at a very young age how transactional sex is and how it's really easy to get used if you allow yourself the opportunity to be used. It is the reality that making a name for yourself as a writer or having a career is a lot easier said than done. There was a multitude of things that, really dampened my honeymoon experience. But even now, I lived in New York for almost 4 years now. I'll have a day, or it happens like once a week. I'll have a day or an hour, or I'll do something, and I'll go to hot yoga, or I'll get my coffee and do my work, or I'll walk home, or even I'll sit in my apartment and make mac and cheese, and I'll watch, my TV show in my bed. And I'm just incredibly happy to be here, because this is what I wanted growing up. I wanted to have the shitty small apartment and the friends who live around the corner and my local bar and having a community of people that I can go work out with at the gym or whatever. I have a really great life here that I've built for myself, and that's all I've ever wanted to. And so the honeymoon period, what it was my freshman year, a lot of it was rooted in being naive, but it wasn't real. What I have now, the ups and downs, the baggage is there, but it's still a honeymoon in some ways, because I'm still incredibly grateful for all of it.
So you're in college. When does Goodbye to Boyhood start to come to you?
The way Goodbye to Boyhood came about was in my freshman year of college. I had a conversation with a guy that wanted to hook up with me, but I wasn't feeling it. But we were just chatting, and he said the words, sex is purely transactional, and it has stuck with me for years. And so I was challenged in one of my classes that spring to write a essay about modern love. And so I took that line, I created a vignette about, this character named Boy and kind of walking through the stages of a hookup from a second person point of view. That essay turned into my first short story for Goodbye to Boyhood called Boy. And at the time, I didn't realize that it'd be part of a book of short stories. That was not what was crossing my mind when I wrote it. But then I wrote another story called Fathers, about the relationship of a father and son and the dynamic of what it is to try to have someone else's approval, but also find yourself and your own footing and find forgiveness in a lot of ways. And that came about my freshman, sophomore year of college as well. And then in August, going into my sophomore year of college, my grandma died, right? And so this formative figure in my life who was there for me in every way she could be, who changed my life, who inspired me to come into New York, who taught me the art of loving stories. When she went, I needed an outlet. And so majority of these stories came about my sophomore year.
As you're in this period where you're grieving your grandma's loss, you're wanting to write down these stories, how do these start coming to you? Like, are you just like in a class or working on something and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I feel a sense of inspiration? Or how does it start to trickle in?
A lot of it starts with a phrase or an idea or an inciting conversation. Like, I can tell you that, for example, boobies. I was sitting in my sophomore year stats class with my friend Sarah Ruth, who actually gets a shout out in the book. And I fictionalized us, but we were sitting in stats class and I was so bored. And I was on my calculator and I was just fucking around. And I wrote the word boobies because, that was like what they did in middle school. And so I did that and we had a laugh about it because we were so bored and hysterical and exhausted from finals. And it became a story in the book because it got me thinking about, it became a story in the book because it got me thinking about being in middle school and all the juvenile things you would do to try to have the appeal of other boys and get them to like you, and the lengths you would go to conform. And so the fourth short story of Goodbye to Boyhood, literally called Boobies in all caps, is based on this idea of like getting in trouble because you're trying to please your friends by like writing the word boobies in the calculator. And it's very juvenile, it's very nonsensical, and it's comical. But that idea for that story came about in my sophomore year statistics class, which was terrible. Likewise, Goodbye to Boyhood, the actual title story, kind of came to me because there's this old-fashioned diner that I used to drive by a lot, kind of the town over from where I grew up, and it's super empty all the time. And I just imagined what it would look like to have two characters that exist there in a pocket of time, and no one questions that they have a relationship. They just exist and are able to exist in this one place that everyone often overlooks. And so that's how I came up with Goodbye to Boyhood, the story itself. The final short story, The TV Says the Moon is Going to Be Red, came from memories I had with my grandmother. The main inciting plot of that final short story is an experience I had with her when we sat at the top of her driveway and the moon was like a blood moon, and so it was bright red. These stories came from conversations or moments or memories, but they all stem from somewhere. And I would argue that most fiction stems from something that was real. And I love other art and I love reading other people's work. And so there's also a level of inspiration that came from just reading other coming of age stories as well.
When you get this idea or this inspiration or this phrase, how quickly have you felt these stories flow out of you? Is it like, I have a paragraph that I'm writing, or here it all is, it just flows out at once, or does that speed vary?
Some took forever. I mean, the first 4 stories took me a minute. Birthday Party, that story took so many edits. The King, that was like, that story took me the longest time. I wanted to hit myself. It was brutal. But then other stories like Boyfriends for the Night, that was a one night stream of consciousness. I got that out of me within an hour. The short story Boy, that was a really quick one. That was like 30 minutes. I would say the same thing for My Mom's Boyfriends. That's the 5th short story about these children that grow up feeling like their life is kind of happening too fast and that they are looking for parental rules in their life that they don't have. They don't have necessarily someone to look up to because the idea of a parent can always differ from reality, but it also comes with the kind of the weight of like your parents are growing up for the first time too, and kind of leading with grace over those moments. And so that story came to me on a whim when I was sitting in my apartment on like an October night, and I was watching Dysfunctional Families on TLC or something, you know, and it just kind of was like on a whim, and I was like, ugh, and then I had the idea, and then that was really quick to write as well.
Is there a moment when you knew, oh, I'm writing a book of short stories, or did it just kind of happen to unfold this way?
I knew what Goodbye to Boyhood was going to become my end of my sophomore year of college, when I had a few of these short stories. I had about half of them done, and I knew I wanted to create a collection of 10 short stories. And back then, the book was going to be called For What It's Worth, but it's not. And so I spent my entire summer writing more, my junior year writing more, and the title Goodbye to Boyhood kind of came the summer of 2023, going into my junior year of college.
I mean, so that's like semi-close-ish to when it was released in April of 2024,
yeah,
right?
it was a quick turnaround because it was a team of one, right? A team of one being me. And so I was given the chance to have it traditionally published through a small press my sophomore year of college. Okay. And I turned it down because they denied me the chance of owning my work and having final say in the cover or the design or the final say on the stories themselves. And also what I kind of realized is that I think if the opportunity doesn't look great or doesn't seem like it's calling your name, you also have the ability to kind of create your own opportunity. And so Goodbye to Boyhood was very much, let me do this on my own and make it really great because I know I'm capable of doing that. And so I did. I saved the money, I hired the editors, I hired the cover designer, and I worked extensively on making this thing tight and pretty, but making it my vision. Mm-hmm. And I'm incredibly proud of it. I'm proud that most of this was done. Honestly, like even the formatting, I formatted this myself. And I used TikTok and social media as a way to leverage it. And in some ways, I faced some criticism because there's a lot of pretentiousness within the writing community, or like people that love books that are like independently published projects aren't like worthy of respect or aren't deemed as like professional. But I'd argue that a lot of your favorite musicians were also independent. Chappell Roan was independent. Not that I'm Chappell Roan, but Chappell Roan was independent for a long time. Even when she was on tour with Olivia, she was independent. Frank Ocean is independent. I mean, there's plenty of artists that are independent whose music you love. I just didn't go through a corporation to finish my book. I just made sure I could do it on my own terms and do it the way that I wanted it to be see fit. And it's no less of a book because of that. And the stories themselves are incredibly universal because the book's more than just a book for the LGBTQ plus community, but it's a book secretly for everybody. Goodbye to Boyhood, the way it's designed, the way I created it, is not to sell it based off a bunch of buzzwords saying, hey, here's your gay book, go buy it. Although sometimes I've made some TikToks where I'm like, gay, 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 go read it, because you got to get it out somehow. Yeah. But the truth behind this book is I created this book as like a secret killer. Like here you have this classic coming of age book. It looks very coming of age, right? The blurb doesn't mention anything about gay in here. It's all about like, what's it like to let go of your childhood, to grow up, like struggling with isolation and conformity, like all these universal traits that we all experience. But the book is structured in a way that even if you aren't comfortable with the idea of gayness or struggling with your like gender expression, you are able to read this book and it can kind of put that in words for you without having you to even say it out loud yourself. And it's meant to appeal to anyone who is gay or who isn't gay, in the sense that like both people can read this book and see themselves in it, because it's these fundamental ideas, these feelings that guide us, like isolation, like conformity, like feeling like you're growing up too fast, or that you're jealous because your brother, because the first story is about brothers, is more liked than you are. These are it's universal, and it's meant to be a little misleading. I didn't want to go into this book being like an absolute. a bunch of stories that are, yes, gay, and then confetti falls from the sky, and everyone's wearing rainbow and pride, which is awesome. But I didn't want it to be that, and I didn't want it to be a book where everybody's miserable, and you're reading the book and you're like, wow, I just feel like shit, and that is the most sad, depressing shit ever, and there's no hope whatsoever. I wanted to create a book that existed in gray space, one where identity is much more complicated than a couple words, but it's expressed through a series of short stories where these characters, they don't have the language to describe how they feel when they are feeling these big, overwhelming emotions. And it's through these stories they gain the ability to express how they feel. They kind of gain a piece of themselves along the way, and it's secretly they feeding a message about sexuality and gender without explicitly using those two words.
Yeah, and to the point of a lot of what you just said, like when I read this, I really felt like,
there it is.
Yeah, I really felt like this story is something that it does live in that gray space. It accurately portrays the challenges of being both gay and just someone who's living in Gen Z, but also people on the other side of trying to understand what that experience is like. I think this book is something that both helps LGBTQI plus people feel seen and supported, but also those in their lives understand what they're going through. It does a wonderful job, Spencer, of capturing that dynamic. It truly is amazing. Like I cannot give enough accolades and love to this book. It really is incredible. When you released this in April of 2024, you spent so much time. I can only imagine like perfecting this, laying it out, designing the cover, getting all those final details ready, putting social content out there, hyping it up, like getting people so jazzed for this book. How did it feel to have it out there and to see people reading the book and enjoying it?
It was equal parts fulfilling, equal parts overwhelming and terrifying, because Goodbye to Boyhood, while a lot of these stories are fictional, the emotions behind them are not. And so having it's kind of like people are holding, this piece of yourself. Like I had my heart on my sleeve when I wrote it. And so a lot of what people have said to me is, oh, this book is so vulnerable. And that always makes me feel a bit uneasy, because it's like, oh shit, like you can see right through me, and it's so overwhelming. But equally, that's the price you pay when you put out a project or a piece of art you're proud of, is you are vulnerable and you put yourself in an uncomfortable position for the chance that someone can read it and relate to it, and they can take that and they can take this book and they can go somewhere with it. And that is my greatest goal. And that has been seemingly happening. Unlike Cynthia Erivo, when she's like, I didn't know that was happening. Like, I didn't know. It's like whenever people say to me like that the book has done something for them in a positive way, or that it has had an impact, that is all I could ever ask for. So I have a lot of gratitude.
I think a way to almost reframe the vulnerability statement is, I think this book is almost like uniquely human in a way that helps. I think a struggle that I feel with the gay community, and a big reason why this podcast exists, is I feel like people get so focused on like the things that are exciting and buzzwords, like talking about hookup culture and this guy I just got with and like X, Y, and Z, but people don't take the time to really just understand the day-to-day experiences people go through. And I think this book really does a great job of capturing all of that, Spencer. So truly, like, thank you for putting it out into the world.
That was my greatest goal, right? Was just to create a book that was honest, that was, about both the extreme dramatic, but also the mundane. A collection that kind of unpacks the best moments of childhood and the worst of it, and how both of those things, they're not moments that should be worth regretting, but are moments that are guiding you to the right direction of where you need to be. I have always kind of said that any sort of motion is good motion because you're still pushing yourself forward. And so Goodbye to Boyhood kind of captures that idea. even if there's many periods throughout this collection that are sad, that are sad.
It's life. It captures life so beautifully, and everyone, please.
Thank you. I appreciate it. No,
Please read
seriously,
this
I
book.
appreciate it.
Please, I cannot.
I'm always gagged when people like it. Whenever people come up to me and they're like, "Hey, this book was good," I'm like, "You think really for real?" Because it's my first book. It's my first of many, and it's scary because not everyone likes this book, and that's fine. Not everyone has to, but whenever anyone does, it's always really cool to me, and it's a special experience to have that.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you're able to feel that connection, feel that love. But speaking of what you just said, you said it's your first book of many. So do you have any ideas on what you want to do next?
Yeah, I mean, the second book will be my debut novel. It's going to be a much bigger project. It's going to be not published on my own, I don't think. I'm currently trying to get it traditionally published, so knock on wood or on plaster.
If there's any publishers listening.
Any agents listening, I'm looking for, some help here with this next one. But this next one's going to be a much more adult book, because Goodbye to Boyhood is a YA book. It's intense, but it's YA. It's meant to be universal. This next book's a little more particular. It's about the general kind of guiding emotions behind it. Our anti-heroic protagonists, emotional detachment is a really big theme within this next one, and exploring the dynamic of gay men and straight female relationships. And so I have no clue where that book's going to head. I have no clue when it will be finished. I guarantee you, though, I'm very excited with it, and I'm very proud of it so far. And I think that it will be an evolution of Goodbye to Boyhood in many ways. So
that sounds...
Stay tuned on that. If you want to hear more about it, follow me on Substack, where I write a new essay that's published every Friday.
And I'm subscribed, and I can attest that that's also riveting to read.
Fun stuff.
And when the book is done, though, would love to have you come back. Maybe we could do like a book club with our listeners, and we can like go through the whole book and unpack it. And I think that'd be really cool.
Love it.
Before we wrap up and we end this, I like to end all of these episodes with new guests with a simple question. If you were to look back at the young version of Spencer, the little Spencer growing up in Connecticut, feeling like he was different, what advice would you give to him?
Slow down. I would say to the younger version of myself, feeling different and feeling on the outside is a very normal feeling. And you are not a villain for feeling this way. You are not wrong or a mistake for all of the emotions and the baggage that you carry. And one day you're going to look back and realize that all of those moments were worth something. And so pause in your childhood, let it happen, enjoy it for what it is, because one day you're going to be in your apartment in New York City, dermal rolling your scalp, and trying to make sure you maintain your hairline. And so enjoy the times when you're young, when you have good hair, and when you don't have to worry about these things, okay? Enjoy it, seriously. So that's what I would say to him.
That's great advice. That's great advice. Slow down, enjoy it while you have it.
And appreciate these moments, for better or for worse, for what they will shape you into.
Yes, they all make you who you are. Well, Spencer, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story with us. Where can people find you? Where can they get Goodbye to Boyhood? Plug it all.
To find me online, just follow me at by Spencer Thomas. BY, because like Spencer Thomas wrote the book, so by Spencer. Get it? Like by me. Yeah. And so TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, X. By Spencer Thomas. If you would like to read my book Goodbye to Boyhood, you can find it online or at your local bookstore. It is available everywhere. It is also available online in the form of an ebook. And so check it out. It is a collection of 10 short stories about growing up. It's a quick read, and it is the product of my college experience that I wrote from the ages of 19 to 21. And so check it out.
Please read it, everyone. It is amazing.
And my Substack at by Spencer Thomas.
Yes, subscribe. I'll put the links in the description of the episode so you can find this all super easily. Spencer, again, thank you so much. You're always welcome back whenever you want to come chat and giggle or whatever. You're always welcomed here. You guys can find the podcast at Unpack THT on Instagram. Until then, I hope you guys have a good rest of your week. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.